What price would you pay for survival when the enemy lurks in every shadow, ready to carve your fate into the unforgiving earth? The clamor of war drums thunders in your ears, but it's the whispers of treachery that gnaw at your sanity. You stand shoulder to shoulder with men, yet trust is a dagger's edge, one slip, one betrayal, and you'll find yourself on the wrong end of a Carthaginian spear, or worse yet, abandoned in the chaos of a battlefield that swallows the weak whole. You think life is tough under the weight of armor? Think again. The stench of sweat and fear mingles with the metallic tang of blood, creating an intoxicating perfume that lingers long after the last battle cry has faded. And the laughter? Dark and twisted, it reverberates through the camp like a ghost from the depths of Hades, mocking your every move. Better a dead hero than a living coward, they say, but the truth is far uglier. Heroes don't get to choose how they die. As you polish your shield, the sun glints off its surface, reflecting a harsh reality. Each scratch tells a story, each dent echoes a moment when death nearly claimed you. Your hand trembles, not from fear, but from the thrill of impending doom. Will you return home in triumph, or will your bones be left to rot beneath a foreign sky, picked up by crows? Foes don't just wear armor, they wear masks. Deceit is a weapon as sharp as any sword. In the marketplace, your best friend can become your fiercest rival, and the merchant's smile can hide a dagger. One moment, you're exchanging laughs over a jug of wine, the next, blood spills in the streets like a harrowing painting come to life. The fine line between loyalty and betrayal is drawn in crimson. You think the Romans are your only enemies? Think again. The gods themselves have turned their backs on you, their capricious whims deciding whether you live or die. Every omen, every strange occurrence in the sky sends shivers down your spine. Are the gods laughing at your plight, or conspiring against you? The weight of fate is a heavy mantle, and you're not the only one wearing it. Night falls, and the world you know transforms. Shadows dance like restless spirits, and the flickering campfires illuminate the fear etched in every soldier's face. The tales of monsters lurking beyond the hills are more than just folklore, they're warnings. Sometimes, you hear the whispers of the fallen, their voices carried by the wind. They beckon you to join them, to escape this hellish existence. Laughter erupts from a nearby circle, but it's tinged with madness. Tomorrow, we fight, they chant, and you wonder, how many will see tomorrow? How many will be just another footnote in history's merciless scroll? With each passing moment, the stakes escalate, the battlefield is a game board, and you're a pawn teetering on the edge of annihilation. So, what choice will you make when the drums of war call your name? Will you rise? Will you fall? The air crackles with tension, and the only certainty is chaos. Welcome to your fate, Carthaginian soldier. The air hangs heavy with salt, each breath a reminder of the sea's relentless embrace. A storm brews, dark clouds swirling above like a gathering of angry spirits, and somewhere, in the heart of that tempest, a scream pierces through, a haunting wail of loss, echoing against the harsh cliffs of Carthage. The city, once a cradle of hope, now stands on the precipice, trembling as it senses the weight of its own ambition. I remember the first time I saw Dido, fierce and untamed, standing on the shoreline, her hair whipping in the wind like banners of war. Her eyes, oh, those eyes! They burned with a fire that threatened to consume everything in its path. She was a woman on the edge, a soul wrestling with the ghosts of her past and the enormity of her dreams. I will build a city, she vowed, her voice steady, but I could feel the tremor beneath the surface, the fear that clawed at her heart. And I understood, oh how I understood. The weight of creation is a double-edged sword, with every brick she laid, she built a path to greatness, and a grave for her own peace. Then there was Hamilcar, a commander forged in the fires of battle, a man whose very being was intertwined with the sea. He stood beside Dido, his silhouette framed against the chaos of gathering clouds, a stoic figure embodying strength, yet his heart pulsed with a vulnerability that left him exposed. It is not enough to conquer, he said, his eyes staring into the horizon, where the waves roared like beasts yearning for blood. To rule, one must understand the tides. Yet I saw the truth lurking behind his bravado. He was as much a prisoner of his ambitions as any sailor lost at sea. A sudden crack of thunder shook the ground beneath us, a reminder that nature itself was poised for war. The streets of Carthage, once alive with laughter and trade, now felt like a graveyard. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the distant cries of seagulls, marking the sky like ghosts of those who had dared to dream too large. I watched as Dido clenched her fists, the knuckles white with the pressure of her dreams. "We will not bow to the storms," she shouted, a warrior's roar that set the air aflame. But deep within, I could sense her doubt, a whisper that echoed with every crashing wave. "What does it mean to build? To create a world from nothing but will and sweat?" I remember the laughter of children that once danced through the streets, the warmth of community that felt like an embrace. Now, those echoes were hollow, replaced by the sharp smell of ambition that hung in the air, a scent that could slice through the thickest fog. Hamilcar, with his relentless pursuit of power, felt it too. "The sea gives, but it takes," he murmured one evening as we stood on the docks, the sun sinking into the horizon like a final breath. "We must be ready to fight for what we claim." And then came the ships, majestic titans born from the depths of their dreams, gliding over the waves like harbingers of a new era. Each vessel carried the weight of hopes, dreams, and fears, a collective heartbeat that pulsed through the city. But with each launch, with each wooden hull that breached the surface, I felt a chill creeping through my veins. Was this creation or destruction? The day we launched the first fleet was a cacophony of emotion. Joy dripped from every corner of Carthage, but shadows loomed. I watched Dido, standing tall but fragile, her heart caught in the snare of her ambition. "If we fail," she began, but I didn't need to hear the rest. The unspoken fear danced in the air, twisting like the waves, a promise of potential ruin. Hamilcar's face hardened as he surveyed the horizon, the burden of leadership heavy upon his shoulders. "We will not fail," he declared, but I could see the tremor in his hands, the way he fought against the tide of uncertainty. As the ships sailed into the unknown, a storm broke, a tempest that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. The sky was a frenzied canvas, painted with shades of fury, and I could hear the screams of sailors lost to the depths, swallowed by the sea, ghosts of ambition drowning in their own desire. I remember the sound of wood splintering, sails torn to shreds, and the relentless crash of waves against the hull that echoed with the cries of the damned. "This is our moment!" Dido screamed, her voice rising above the chaos, raw and desperate. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the flicker of doubt as the storm raged on. Hamilcar gripped her arm, grounding her in the turmoil, yet he too was adrift in a whirlpool of conflict, his dreams clashing with the reality of survival. "Hold on," he bellowed, his voice a lifeline thrown into a sea of despair. And then it struck me, the true heart of Carthage was not in its ships or walls, but in its people, flawed, raw, and vibrantly alive, caught in a dance with fate. The city was a tapestry of ambition and fear, love and loss, a fragile thing shaped by the tides of time. I could see Dido and Hamilcar, two souls intertwined, battling the storm together, each wave crashing like a heartbeat against their resolve. I remember standing there, soaked to the bone, feeling the pulse of the storm, the weight of the city pressing down on my chest. What would happen if they succeeded? What if they failed? The thoughts tangled in my mind, a web of dreams and nightmares, and I could hardly breathe. In that moment, I realized, we were all just sailors in a tempest, searching for a safe harbor, wondering if the winds would ever still. And the ships sailed on, their fates forever entwined with the rising and falling tides, a testament to a dream that would either rise like a phoenix or drown in the abyss. The war horn blared, its sound a banshee's wail slicing through the dawn, stirring the souls of warriors who had long since forgotten the taste of peace. I stood among them, the gritty sand of the training grounds beneath my feet, a burning sensation clawing at my throat. Our general, Hamilcar, a figure of towering intensity, had eyes like shards of ice, piercing through the haze of uncertainty. Each soldier felt it, a chilling foreboding as the sun bled slowly over the horizon, illuminating our destiny with an ominous glow. "Today, we march. For the glory of Carthage." His voice rang out, steady yet laced with a tremor that echoed my own fear. I remembered my father's words, the weight of history pressing down like a funeral shroud. "Carthage is built on blood," he had said, and I could taste that bitter truth on my tongue. I clenched my fists, feeling the calloused grip of a sword that had become an extension of my own being. There was no turning back now, the dread of failure hung heavy in the air, a palpable entity, wrapping around us like a noose. I caught a glimpse of my brother, Malik, standing rigid and resolute, his face a mask of determination. But I knew him well. Beneath that armor of bravado, he was just as terrified. We both had our demons, his were born of ambition and the crushing weight of expectation, mine, a tempest of self-doubt that clawed at my insides. If I falter, I disappoint not just myself, but my people, I thought, the words echoing endlessly in the hollow chambers of my heart. Carthage was a city built on the back of commerce and conquest, its military structure intricately woven into the very fabric of our existence. The hierarchy was unforgiving, a brutal ladder where each rung was painted in blood, ambition, and loyalty. There were the elite generals, warriors of immense renown, commanding legions whose loyalty was matched only by the fear they instilled. Then came the captains, fierce and sharp, like daggers in the night, leading their men with a mix of valor and desperation. I was but a foot soldier, a cog in this relentless machine, yet in that moment, I felt the weight of history pressing down on my shoulders. "Look around you," Malik whispered, his voice barely audible over the din. "Each man here carries the dreams and fears of our ancestors." I nodded, trying to absorb the enormity of it all, the shadows of those who had fallen before us whispering through the gaps in our armor. We marched, a sea of blood and grit, our boots thudding against the earth like a heartbeat. I looked ahead, catching glimpses of the enemy across the field, their banners snapping furiously in the wind, a dire omen, perhaps, or a call to arms. But it was not the enemy's strength that unnerved me, it was the gaze of my comrades, filled with anticipation and dread, reflecting the turmoil within. As we positioned ourselves, the commander's voice broke through the fog of my thoughts. "Carthage demands sacrifice," he shouted, the fervor in his words igniting something deep within me. The cries of battle were a symphony of chaos, but I felt detached, as if I were watching a dream unfold, too surreal to grasp. I could almost hear the heartbeat of the cosmos, echoing the pulse of our impending fate. Then the order came, a single command that shattered the silence, a clash of steel against steel, and we surged forward. The cacophony of war enveloped me, a tempest of fear and adrenaline, a dance of death where valor and terror entwined like lovers. My sword tasted flesh for the first time, and I recoiled, the horror of it gnawing at my insides. I had always romanticized war, but in that moment, I was drowning in the blood and cries of men, my heart racing wildly, as if trying to escape the gravity of my actions. Malik was beside me, a whirlwind of fury, eyes alight with a fire that both inspired and terrified me. He fought with an intensity that bordered on madness, and I feared for him. "Brother!" I shouted, but the sounds of war swallowed my voice whole. I felt a surge of helplessness as I watched him engage an enemy, his blade moving with the elegance of a dancer yet carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "Stay close," he yelled back, and I could see the shadows of our past flickering in his eyes, the memories of training, the laughter that once filled our home, now replaced by the grim reality of survival. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was something beautiful about our shared struggle, a bond that transcended the very fabric of our existence. Then a surge of dread washed over me, the air thickening, charged with something I couldn't grasp. I caught sight of a figure in the distance, a general of the enemy, his presence a dark omen on the battlefield. The whispers of fate rustled through the ranks like a chilling breeze, and I felt it, a sense of doom creeping closer, a reminder of our mortality, of the fragility of life. "Fight for our city! Fight for the shadows of those who came before!" Hamilcar's voice broke through my thoughts, a rallying cry that ignited the fire in my chest. I gripped my sword tighter, every heartbeat a pulse of defiance against the encroaching darkness. I remembered my father's stories, the harrowing tales of war and glory, of ancestors who carved their legacies in the blood-stained sands of time. I remembered the taste of earth and iron, the smell of smoke and sweat, and I surged forward. The battlefield was a grotesque canvas, painted in strokes of fury and despair. I fought, lost in the rhythm of violence, every clash of metal a heartbeat, every scream a reminder of our fragility. The air was suffused with the scent of sweat and blood, a macabre perfume that clung to my skin. I was no longer merely a soldier, I was a part of something larger, a tide of humanity battling against the inevitable pull of darkness. But as the sun dipped lower, staining the sky with crimson hues, the haunting reminder of mortality hung heavy in the air. I could sense the shift, the tide turning, a whisper of fate trailing behind us like a ghost. In that moment, the chaos fell away, and I locked eyes with Malik across the battlefield, a fleeting connection that spoke volumes. There was love, fear, hope, despair, all boiling down to the connection forged in our shared fate. "Remember who we are," I shouted, my voice a fragile thread in the storm. And as the shadows lengthened, uncertainty wrapped around us like a shroud. I felt the weight of Carthage, a city built on ambition and sacrifice, resting heavily on my heart. Each beat resonated with the promise of glory and the spectre of loss, weaving together the rich tapestry of who we were, warriors, brothers, shadows in the twilight of history. The world around us surged and receded, each moment slipping away into the vastness of time, but we stood resolute, locked in an eternal struggle against the encroaching darkness, fighting not just for our lives, but for the very soul of Carthage itself. And as the battle raged on, I realized it was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the memories, the dreams, and the echoes of those who dared to stand against the tide of oblivion. The sun hung low, a blood-red orb casting long shadows over the dusty training grounds of Carthage. I could hear the clash of metal, the grunts of men, the bitter taste of sweat mingling with the acrid smell of fear and ambition. This was not just a place, it was a crucible. A once proud city simmering in desperation, and we were its desperate children, each of us yearning to carve our names into the stone of history or be forgotten, like whispers in the wind. I remember the day I stood there, heart pounding, the pulse of my own blood thrumming in my ears. Each beat screamed a warning, "What will you sacrifice?" I looked around at the other recruits, eyes wide with a blend of terror and desire. There was Cassius, a wiry boy with a face that betrayed his tender age, yet his eyes burned with unquenchable fire. He was terrified, not just of the training, but of what it meant to become a soldier. I could see the flicker of doubt in him, that gnawing fear that his dreams would turn to dust, just as so many before him had. Then there was Livia, her fierce demeanor a mask for the vulnerability she never dared to show. She stood tall, chin raised, fists clenched, her body radiating defiance. But I knew the truth hidden in her guarded smile. She had lost her brother to the wars that had ripped through our lands, and every swing of her training sword was a desperate attempt to reclaim his lost honor. She would rather die than let that loss define her. The training sergeant, a looming figure draped in shadow, barked orders, his voice cutting through the thick air like a blade. "Faster! Stronger!" Each command pierced the fragile resolve we held like glass. We moved in unison, a chaotic dance of fear and determination, but I sensed a storm brewing beneath the surface. A storm of memories. I remember my father's laughter, the way he would tell stories of heroes and battles, each tale laced with the intoxicating aroma of roasting lamb. But those memories were fading, evaporating like mist under the sun. Now, all that remained was the weight of his absence, an anchor dragging me into uncertainty. Would he have been proud of me? Or would he have seen me as a foolish child, trading dreams for despair? The first day of training, I fell. I remember the ground rushing up to meet me, the sound of bodies colliding, the gasps of my comrades echoing in the stillness of the moment. I hit the earth hard, my palms scraping against the coarse dust. Livia was there, her hands reaching down, pulling me back up into the chaos. "Get up," she shouted, her voice fierce, yet I could hear the tremor beneath it, an echo of her own fears. I could feel the weight of her expectations. As the weeks dragged on, the days blurred. We trained at dawn, our muscles aching and souls weary. I remember standing in the dark, staring at the stars, each one a cruel reminder of the vastness of our ambitions against the insignificance of our existence. The cosmos laughed at us, a mockery of our struggles. But we fought on, swinging swords until our hands bled, filling the air with the sweet metallic tang of hope and despair. Cassius often slipped away to hide under the old olive trees that dotted the outskirts of the training ground. I would find him there, lost in thought, staring at the gnarled trunks like they held the wisdom of the ages. "What if I don't make it?" he would whisper. His voice was barely a tremor, but it carried the weight of 1,000 worries. I can't bear the thought of dying without being remembered. I would sit beside him, my own fears mingling with his, the night air thick with unspoken dreams. Then live, Cassius. Live so fiercely that even the stones will remember your name. My words felt hollow, yet they were all I had to offer. The training grew more brutal, a vicious cycle of hope and despair. I remember the day when it became real. We stood before the officers, faces pale, hearts racing, as they announced the first real deployment, our first taste of war. Panic gripped the air, a thick fog of uncertainty. A collective intake of breath, a pause where the world held still. And then, in that moment of silence, Livia spoke. We have to fight. We owe it to those we've lost. Her voice cracked, but determination shone through her eyes like the dawn breaking after a long night. The others rallied around her, a chorus of voices rising, raw, unyielding. I felt my heart swell. We were no longer just recruits, we were warriors, bound by our scars, both visible and hidden. But within that unity, I felt a crack, a tremor deep within me. The knowledge that we were stepping into the abyss of something terrible, a grim dance with death that would etch itself into our souls. I remember that feeling, the cold grip of fear tightening around my heart. The clock ticked on, time was no longer our ally. We were just children playing soldiers, the innocence of our youth slipping through our fingers like sand. I remember looking at Cassius and Livia, their faces illuminated by the flickering torchlight, shadows morphing into specters of our own making. As the night deepened, the cries of training turned into a haunting lullaby, the songs of despair and hope mingling in the air, beckoning us forward. Would we rise as heroes or fall as echoes? The answer loomed just beyond the horizon, waiting to reveal itself in a blaze of agony or triumph. And just like that, we were caught in the web of destiny, the threads of our lives intertwining in a chaotic tapestry woven with blood and dreams. As dawn broke, I felt the weight of it all, the fragile balance between courage and fear, life and death, pressing down like a boulder on my chest, a resounding drumbeat that signaled the beginning of everything and nothing. The ground trembled beneath us, and in that moment of uncertainty, we were no longer just recruits. We were Carthaginian soldiers, standing at the precipice of a journey that would redefine what it meant to fight. The world was dark, the night deepening around us, but we would step forward, together, into the unknown, hearts pounding like war drums. The air crackled with electricity, each breath heavy with anticipation, our destinies spiraling like stars across an unyielding sky. The chill of the wind cut through the silence like a knife, howling through the abandoned streets of a war-torn city, carrying with it the scent of smoke and despair. Shadows flickered, hungry, restless specters that danced in the flickering light of a dying fire. I stood there, breathless, heart pounding in my chest like a battle drum, every heartbeat echoing the fear that clung to me like a second skin. They were coming. I could feel it in my bones, the mercenaries, the hired guns, the ghosts of ambition and desperation. They wore the weight of their own betrayals, each step a dance with death. I remember the first time I met Harrow. He was a monster draped in human skin, his eyes two coals burning with something far darker than ambition, regret, perhaps, or the remnants of a soul that had once known peace. He leaned against a crumbling wall, cigarette smoke curling around him like a lover's embrace. "You think you know war," he sneered, laughter echoing like a gunshot, loud and jarring. "You don't. But I can show you." I wanted to laugh back, but the truth settled in my gut like a stone. I didn't want to know. There was something tragic about Harrow, an ache that twisted my insides. He wasn't just a mercenary, he was a man who had lost everything. I saw it in his eyes, in the way he clenched his jaw when the memories flooded back. He had fought in battles where the ground was soaked in blood, where the cries of the innocent mingled with the laughter of the guilty. He was both ally and enemy, a double-edged sword, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was dragging me into a darkness I wasn't ready to face. Then there was Mara, fierce and untamed, a wild spirit trapped in a war that sought to break her. She was a force of nature, a tempest of raw emotion and unyielding strength. I watched her as she paced like a caged animal, her eyes darting between shadows, searching for something, someone. "They won't stop," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "They'll come for us, and we'll be nothing but collateral damage." I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but the words stuck in my throat like shards of glass. Instead, I nodded, knowing that her fear was justified, that the mercenaries were not just mercenaries but harbingers of chaos. I remember the first battle we fought together. The night was thick with tension, the air electric, charged with the promise of violence. The enemy surged forward, faceless and relentless, a tide of destruction. Harrow grinned, a grim smile that chilled my blood, and I couldn't help but feel that he thrived in the chaos, that this was where he felt alive. I was paralyzed, the cacophony of gunfire and screams drowning my senses, but Harrow moved like a phantom, a dance of death through the smoke and shadows, embodying the very notion of survival at any cost. Mara fought beside him, a whirlwind of fury and determination, but I could see the cracks in her armor, the way her hands trembled slightly as she raised her weapon, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Fear and bravery intertwined in that moment, a dance more beautiful and heartbreaking than I had ever seen. "We have to keep moving," she shouted over the thunder of war, but even her voice trembled, a reminder that even the strongest can be overwhelmed. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of crimson, I felt the weight of our choices pressing down on us. Each fallen body was a story untold, a life cut short, and I wondered if we were becoming the very monsters we despised. The mercenaries, those who danced in the dark, were not just allies, they were mirrors reflecting our own fears back at us. I could see it in Harrow's gaze, the flicker of something fragile hiding beneath the surface, fear of becoming obsolete, of being nothing but a weapon, a cog in a machine that devoured everything in its path. In the aftermath of battle, as we gathered the wounded like broken dolls, I watched Harrow's facade crumble. He knelt beside a fallen comrade, someone he had fought alongside for years, and the raw agony on his face twisted something deep within me. His tears fell onto the dirt, mingling with the blood that stained the ground, a sacrificial offering to a god that had long since abandoned us. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking, a man who had never known the softness of regret, now shattered. And Mara, fierce Mara, stood by his side, the wildness in her spirit dimming as she realized the price of survival. "We can't afford to feel," she muttered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The truth clawed at her, each sob a reminder that to be human was to feel, and in this world of mercenaries and shadows, that was a dangerous gift. Yet through all this, the clock kept ticking, marking moments that felt both eternal and fleeting. Time was a ghost that haunted us, a reminder of battles yet to come, of choices that could shatter lives or build them anew. Each tick echoed in my ears, a reminder that we were running out of time, that the mercenaries would return as both allies and enemies, wielding their weapons like the double-edged sword of fate. I remember standing there, in the middle of the chaos, the shadows closing in around us, feeling the weight of our decisions hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. It was a moment suspended in time, a fragile illusion where the lines between allies and enemies blurred, where every breath felt like a countdown to the next encounter, the next painful reminder that in this world, trust was as rare as mercy. And as the shadows deepened, wrapping around us like a shroud, I realized, with a sickening clarity, that in the end we were all mercenaries in our own right, fighting battles for causes we barely understood, grasping desperately at fleeting moments of connection in a world that sought to tear us apart. The fight was far from over, and the clock was ticking, each second a reminder that the only certainty was uncertainty itself. The clanging of metal echoed down the corridor, slicing through the stillness like a knife through flesh. It was the sound of boots marching in sync, the haunting cadence of lives tethered to the rhythm of duty and dread. In the barracks, the air was thick with the pungent aroma of sweat and oil, memories trapped in every crumbling brick, every darkened corner. The walls were alive, sagging under the weight of unspoken fears, the weight of men and women molded by routine, bound by something greater than themselves. I remember the first time I stood in formation under the unforgiving glare of the morning sun. Daniel, a wiry man with eyes that seemed to flicker like dying stars, kept shifting his weight, his face a mask of anxiety. He was the sort of guy who laughed too loudly, trying to drown out the echoes of his own insecurities. He shot me a glance, a silent plea. "Just breathe," I whispered, but my words were swallowed by the marching feet. He'd trained for months, and yet here he was, caught in the moment, grappling with the ghosts of his past like they were chains holding him down. "Fall in." The sergeant's voice boomed, a war cry that pulled us from our reverie. It was always the same, day after day, a cycle of commands and compliance. I could feel my heart thrumming in my chest, a constant reminder that no matter how many times I'd done this, the fear never left. The fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. And there I was, a paragon of imperfection, caught between the echoes of my own self-doubt and the rigorous discipline demanded of me. The barracks had a rhythm, a sinister song that played on repeat: wake up, drills, meals, inspections. Each segment bled into the next, a monochrome existence that threatened to swallow us whole. The cafeteria, for instance, was a war zone of its own. I watched as Daniel's fork clattered against his tray, the sound reverberating through a space filled with the low murmurs of discontent. "It's just slop," he muttered, pushing the mushy peas around as if they were a metaphor for his life, unpalatable, stuck in limbo. You'd think they'd at least try to make it look edible. And then there was MIA, a fierce spirit with an unyielding gaze. She had a way of cutting through the fog of despair that hung over us like a shroud, but even she had her demons. I could see it in the way her fingers trembled slightly as she picked at a scab on her arm, a reminder of the last training exercise gone wrong. "It's nothing, just a scratch," she'd say, her voice a defiant whisper wrapped in bravado. But we both knew it was more than that. The weight of expectation pressed down on her, and I couldn't help but wonder if the scars ran deeper than what could be seen. Before sleep wrapped its heavy arms around us each night, the barracks would become a sanctuary of secrets. Shadows danced across the walls, whispering tales of loss and longing. I lay on my bunk, listening to the soft, uneven breaths of my comrades, a symphony of vulnerability and strength. Daniel would scribble in his worn notebook, the pages filled with half-formed thoughts and dreams that seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. I remember, he'd start, but then silence would swallow him whole, as if the weight of his own memories was too much to bear. The nights felt heavy with unspoken words, dreams flickering like ghosts behind shut eyelids. I often dreamed of home, the laughter of my siblings ringing in my ears, a stark contrast to the barracks' oppressive silence. And yet, those dreams often turned dark, twisting into nightmares of faces I'd never see again, soldiers lost in the haze of conflict. I'd wake up gasping, the spectre of mortality clinging to me like smoke, and I'd glance over at MIA, who'd be staring at the ceiling, lost in her own haunted reverie. "Do you think we'll ever get out of here?" she'd ask, her voice barely a whisper, but the question hung in the air like a loaded gun. The routine felt suffocating, a cage built from the very things meant to protect us. She was the wild heart among us, a flame flickering against the darkness, yet even she was losing hope, the edges of her spirit dimming with each passing day. And then came the day it all changed. It started with a crack, a sudden explosion that sent us scrambling. Chaos erupted, the tight-knit routine shattered like glass underfoot. I remember the adrenaline surging through me, the primal instinct to survive kicking in as we rushed toward the source of the sound. Daniel's face was pale, his bravado stripped away, leaving only raw fear. "What if it's real? What if we don't make it?" he shouted, his voice strained. I grabbed his arm, feeling the tremor beneath my fingers, and whispered the only truth I could offer in that moment: we fight together. As we rushed outside, the world had shifted. The sky was painted with an eerie red, a warning sign from the universe, a cosmic reckoning. In that moment, I realized we were not just soldiers, we were the sum of our fears and desires, a fragmented tapestry woven from the threads of our pasts. There was no time to dwell on dreams or regrets. We were thrust into a reality sharper than any blade, a confrontation with the unknown. And as we stood shoulder to shoulder, hearts pounding in unison, I knew we would face whatever lay ahead together. The barracks had birthed us, yes, but it would not define us. We would carve our own destinies from the chaos, and as we braced ourselves for the storm, I felt a flicker of hope igniting in the depths of my soul. In that moment, we were alive. And alive was enough. The air crackled with tension, a charged silence before the storm. Beneath the flickering shadows of torches, Hamilcar gripped his sword, the cold steel biting into his palm, each pulse of his heart echoing the unsheathing of destiny. He stood on the precipice of chaos, a man caught in a relentless tide that threatened to swallow him whole. The looming clash was not merely a battle, it was a reckoning. The cries of soldiers echoed through the night, a haunting chorus of fear and determination blending into a cacophony of raw emotion. His breath came shallow, a whisper swallowed by the roar of impending conflict. I remember the way the bronze gleamed under the sun, how it promised glory and whispered of death, he thought, fighting against a tide of fear that threatened to drown him. He was not just a soldier, he was a father, a husband, his heart tethered to lives beyond the battlefield. Each swing of his sword was an echo of laughter, a reminder of the warm embrace of his daughter, the tender smile of his beloved. Yet here he was, in the clutches of war, where steel clashed and blood flowed like a river, where every heartbeat was another step towards oblivion. Across the field, in the growing darkness, Elia tightened the straps of her armor. She felt its weight, the leather biting into her skin, reminding her of the cost of bravery. I remember the stories, the myths of those who fought for honor, not knowing the prices they would pay, she mused, the memory swirling like the dust beneath her feet. Her heart raced not just from the thrill of battle, but from the haunting thought of loss. She had already lost too much, her brother's laughter still echoed in her mind, a ghost that urged her forward even as fear threatened to consume her. The clang of weapons rang through the air, a cacophony that snapped the fragile threads of her resolve. She had seen the faces of men, once proud and strong, now twisted in agony, their dreams extinguished in the blink of an eye. Each swing of her spear was a plea, a desperate cry for survival in a world torn by ambition and greed. Yet, lurking beneath her fear was something darker, a tantalizing thrill that coursed through her veins. What is it about war that draws us in, that ignites a fire deep within our souls, she pondered, the shadows revealing glimpses of the woman she used to be, before the battlefield had etched its mark upon her spirit. Hamilcar's thoughts faltered, consumed by the sounds of clashing armor, the acrid scent of sweat and blood. The soldiers of Carthage, their weapons glinting like the stars above, formed a wall of strength and fear. He caught sight of his friend, Malek, a beacon amidst the storm, his laughter a memory of light. Yet, even now, as he tightened the grip on his shield, Malek's eyes betrayed an underlying terror. We are mere mortals, caught in the web of fate, Hamilcar thought, emotion swirling like a tempest within him. But what is fate if not a choice dressed in the garb of destiny? The air thickened, swirling with the dust of ancient soil, each grain a memory of those who had fought before them, who had fallen in the pursuit of glory. Elia stood at the ready, her heart pounding like a war drum, a primal rhythm echoing through her bones. She had witnessed the brutality of war, the way it tore through families, villages, lives. Yet, even in that realization, there was a flicker of something else, defiance. I will not let fear chain me, she breathed, her resolve hardening like the armor she wore. She would fight not just for herself, but for all those who could not. As the clash began, the air erupted into a frenzy of sound, the metallic shouts, the piercing cries of the wounded, and the relentless thud of feet stomping across the earth. Hamilcar surged forward, the weight of his ancestors on his shoulders. He swung his sword, feeling the warmth of blood splatter against his skin, a visceral reminder of where he stood. This is war, he thought, a twisted smile breaking through the adrenaline-fueled haze. This is what it means to be alive. And yet, in the eye of this storm, he felt it, the creeping shadow of doubt slithering into his heart. What was the cost of this life? Each thrust of his sword brought with it a memory, a face he could never unsee. I remember every sacrifice, every scream. I remember my son, he thought with a pang that cut deeper than the blade he wielded. The weight of his choices pressed heavily against him, a constant reminder of the fragile line between honor and madness. Then, amidst the chaos, he saw Elia, her figure a whirlwind of determination and fear. She fought like a lioness, fierce and unyielding, yet he saw the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, the same fear he felt consuming him. We are not invincible, we are human, he thought, a fragile truth amidst the raging storm. But perhaps that is our strength. As the battle raged, the clash of metal echoed like thunder, thunder that promised not just destruction, but rebirth, a rebirth forged in the fires of despair. The ground trembled beneath them, the earth soaked in the essence of those who fought, those who died. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment, a timeless expanse where dreams and nightmares collided, where fear was both a shackle and a weapon. And in that haunting tableau, as shadows danced grotesquely across the battlefield, they were not just soldiers, they were echoes of humanity, caught in the relentless rhythm of war, fighting for something greater than themselves. Every heartbeat echoed like a war drum, every breath steeped in the weight of destiny, as they clashed, bled, and battled against the darkness that threatened to consume them. The night was far from over, the weight of their choices lingering like a spectre, haunting their every step as they moved deeper into the heart of the storm. No end. Only the ferocity of the infinite now. The wind howled like a banshee, chilling the bones of the crew aboard the trireme, scourge of the sea star. I stood at the prow, heart racing, as waves crashed like thunder against the hull. Salt water stung my eyes, but the taste of dread was sharper. Somewhere out there, beyond the grey veil of storm clouds, the Roman fleet waited, silent, deadly, and relentless. The flickering torches aboard our ship cast ghostly shadows, and I caught a glimpse of my comrades, Hadris, fierce and resolute, his grip white-knuckled on the oar, and Lyra, her voice steady even as her hands trembled, a warrior, but a woman haunted. Each heartbeat echoed the weight of our fate, each breath laden with the knowledge that this night might be our last. In the grip of tempestuous chaos, I could see Hadris's resolve hardening like iron forged in the flames of battle. He was driven by vengeance, a fire ignited when they took his brother, another victim of the unforgiving tide of war. A quick flash of memory, his brother's laughter, now silenced, replaced by the howling wind. Hadris's eyes glinted with a wildness that terrified me, yet I longed to share that unyielding spirit. But deep down, I feared that rage would consume him. "Keep your oar steady," he barked, voice booming over the wind. The sound cut through me like a blade, and I nearly dropped my oar. How could he remain so steadfast? The storm bore down like a vengeful deity, every wave a reminder of our mortality. "We will not let them steal our destiny away." Lyra's gaze flickered toward me, an unspoken challenge between us. Her eyes held secrets, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she more afraid of the Romans or of Hadris's wrath? Every ounce of her strength seemed to pulse in the air, a tension thicker than the storm. But she wore her heart like a shield, and I found myself yearning to know her, to understand the depths of her fear, the burdens she carried. "Concentrate," she shouted, though her voice trembled, betraying her own fear. I could see her knuckles turning white, every sinew tightly coiled as she pulled against the unrelenting water. I remembered the way she laughed, how it rang clear like a bell in the chaos of camp. But that laughter had faded, drowned out by the drum of impending doom. The world narrowed, time twisted painfully as we battled against the elements. The rhythmic thauto of our oars slicing through the surf became a heartbeat, our unified pulse against the oncoming darkness. I could taste the adrenaline, feel it thrumming through my veins. Each stroke, a desperate act of defiance. But in the shadows of the storm, I heard whispers of ghosts, of sailors lost to the depths, of mothers weeping for sons never to return. The sea was unforgiving. It could give life and take it away in an instant. Was it madness to think we could conquer it? Suddenly, a blaring horn rang out across the churning waters, a herald of doom. The Romans were upon us. Panic seeped into my bones, I could hear the thunder of their galleys, the clash of metal, the frantic cries of men ready to die for glory. Scourge of the sea trembled beneath my feet as another wave surged, threatening to swallow us whole. "We fight!" Hadris roared, his voice a battle cry. "For honor! For revenge!" The passion in his voice ignited something within me, a flicker of courage battling against my fear. I gripped my oar tighter, ready to face whatever horror awaited us. But the dread still gnawed at me. The sea surged, and my heart raced in tandem with the swell of the water. I glanced at Lyra, her face pale, eyes wide. I saw her memories flash across her features, perhaps a lover lost, a life left behind. I wanted to reach out to her, to remind her that we were together in this storm, that we faced the same terrifying fate. But words died in my throat, lost among the cacophony of war and fear. Then, the first clash of swords rang out, harsh and metallic, piercing through the storm. It was like a sickening promise, blood would be spilled tonight. Hadris leapt to the side, drawing his sword, a glint of determination in his eyes that made the air thick with tension. "Steady, steady," he shouted, rallying us as the Roman ship loomed closer. I felt the urgency in his voice, the desperation that clung to it like a shroud. The Romans were trained killers, and we were merely fishermen, filled with fire but lacking the cold precision of a warrior. Yet here we stood, each of us breathing fear and defiance. The two ships collided, and I was thrown against the wooden deck, the world spinning around me. All I could hear was the roar of the sea, the clash of metal, the shouts of men drowning in the storm. I rose, dazed but determined, and saw Hadris battling a Roman soldier, fury and sorrow intertwining in his every swing. Lyra was beside me, her face set in grim resolve as she wielded her own blade. "We cannot turn back." "Fight," she screamed, and I felt that desperate pulse within her, an echo of my own fear. In that moment, we were connected, two souls intertwined in the chaos of life and death. There was no room for hesitation, no time for regret. The battle swelled and crashed around us, filling the air with a symphony of violence. I felt the heat of the fight coursing through my veins, the terror mingling with adrenaline. My heart pounded, a drum in the night, a reminder that I was alive, that I would fight for this very breath. And yet, as I struck out against the enemy, I couldn't shake the feeling of something looming over us, a shadow, a spectre of fate. The cosmos seemed to spin, the stars above flickering in silent judgment, watching as we danced on the edge of oblivion. Then it hit me, the battle was not just of flesh and steel, but of soul against soul. Each clash, each scream, was a plea for survival, a desperate grasp for meaning in the madness. In the whirl of battle, I glimpsed Lyra's fierce determination, Hadris's raw pain, and my own haunting fear coalescing into something greater. But just as hope surged, a wave of despair crashed over me. I realized that as much as we tried to carve our destiny in the chaos, we were merely pawns in a game played by gods. The tide of fate was ever shifting, and we were bound to its currents. Whatever the outcome, the sea would claim us all. The world grew dim, the storm swirling around us. I felt the weight of each moment, each heartbeat echoing in the cold night, the battle raging on with no end in sight. The ghosts of the past whispered their warnings, and I could only hold on, clenching my fists, battling the turmoil within. Would we emerge victorious, or would we become another tale of woe lost to the depths of time? The battle raged on, unrelenting, each clash a testament to our will to fight, our desire to live. But as the darkness seeped in, clawing at our resolve, I knew this was just the beginning. Would we grasp the fragile thread of fate and bend it to our will, or would we be swallowed whole by the sea of despair? Time lost its meaning in that storm, and all I could do was fight and pray for dawn to break. The air was thick with salt water and blood, a pungent mix that clung to the throat like a haunting ghost. Screams echoed across the battlefield, sharp and shrill, slicing through the din of clashing swords. I remember the moment vividly, an unrelenting wave of fear crashing over me like the surf against the rocky shores of Lilybaeum. It was the summer of 241 BC, and the First Punic War had reached a fever pitch, the outcome as uncertain as the churning clouds above. There was Marcus, just a boy when the war began, but now a man forged in the fires of combat. His hands trembled as he gripped the hilt of his sword, the weight of steel a cruel reminder that life hung by a thread. I watched him, his eyes wide, reflecting a world so cruel and unyielding that even the gods turned their backs. Fear gripped his heart like a vice, he was terrified of becoming nothing more than a ghost, a whisper lost to the winds of time. Then there was Claudia, a fierce warrior, her spirit as wild and uncontainable as the tempest brewing in the distance. She was a woman amongst men, driven by an insatiable fury that ignited her soul. Memories of her childhood flickered before her eyes, laughter echoing beneath a canopy of stars, the sweet taste of figs on her tongue. But those dreams had been drowned out by the relentless reality of war. The dreams of love, of life, had been snuffed out like a candle, and now, here she stood, a warrior whose heart beat with the ferocity of 1,000 storms. She felt alive only when surrounded by chaos, but the price of that thrill was the haunting knowledge of loss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that twisted and turned like the fates of men, the air crackled with anticipation. I could feel it in my bones, a battle loomed, inevitable as the tides. Soldiers lined the shores of Lilybaeum, their armor glimmering like tortured stars under the fading light, but inside, they were all just scared boys and girls, waiting for the storm to break. "Remember the stories," I whispered to Marcus as he stood, paralyzed by uncertainty. The tales of heroes who fought and fell, their names etched in time. My voice trembled, torn between the need for courage and the suffocating weight of despair. Even if they die, they live on in our hearts. He turned to me, eyes wide, trembling lips forming unspoken fears. But what if I'm not a hero? What if I'm just a shadow? The question lingered, heavy like the clouds that promise rain, a dark omen that hinted at bloodshed. And then there was that moment. The silence that hung in the air, a prelude to the inevitable clash. It was as if time itself held its breath, waiting to exhale the chaos that would soon unfold. Claudia stood resolute, her heart pounding like a war drum, every beat echoing the memories of the fallen. She wrapped her fingers tightly around her spear, feeling the cool wood against her palm, a strange comfort before the storm. Suddenly, the clash began. Metal against metal, screams and shouts, the cacophony of war igniting something primal within us all. I felt the adrenaline rush like wildfire through my veins, yet within that fire, a deep-rooted fear simmered. The ground trembled beneath our feet, a reminder that we were mere mortals in the face of something vast and ungraspable. I turned to see Marcus in the thick of it, fighting for his life. The boy had transformed into a warrior, each swing of his sword a desperate cry for survival. But amidst his bravery, I saw the flicker of doubt, the uncertainty that threatened to drown him. "Live, Marcus! Fight!" I screamed, but the words were swept away in the chaos, lost in the whirlwind of clashing bodies. And then a scream pierced through the tumult, a sound so raw and hollow that it carved its way into my very soul. I turned, heart crashing, to find Claudia, her body frozen in a moment of sheer horror. An enemy soldier had struck, her blood spilling onto the ground like a spilled drink at a feast. Time slowed, and in that instant, the world vanished, leaving only the echoes of her past, the laughter, the dreams, the love that had once filled her heart. "Claudia!" I shouted, dread wrapping around my throat like a noose. She fell to the ground, and the weight of her absence was suffocating, a reminder of the price we pay for our dreams. The battle continued, but for me, it became a blur, shadows and shapes melding into a nightmarish dance. I remember the darkness creeping in, the cold grip of despair threatening to swallow me whole. Marcus fought on, a wild frenzy, a desperate attempt to honor the fallen. But how does one honor the dead while facing the specter of their own mortality? It was a question that echoed around us, haunting each breath. The tides began to shift, the Roman forces pushed forward, a relentless wave crashing against the shores of Carthage. I caught glimpses of fear and fury on every face, an emotional tapestry woven with threads of courage and despair. Bodies fell, stark against the sand, each life extinguished like a flickering flame. I stumbled back, breath ragged, the taste of blood mingling with salt on my lips. In that moment, I felt a kinship with the earth beneath my feet, the cries of the fallen whispering through the winds. They had been warriors, dreamers, lovers, but here they became shadows, destined to wander the shores of time, searching for the light they once knew. The battle raged on, but for me, all that remained was the relentless echo of my memories, haunting and unyielding. Marcus fought valiantly, but I could feel his spirit wavering, the weight of doubt threatening to pull him under. "You are not a shadow!" I screamed, willing my voice to reach him amidst the chaos. "You are the light that burns bright against the darkness." But the storm raged, and I knew, deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. The First Punic War was more than a battle, it was an abyss, a chasm that tore through the very fabric of our souls. All we could do was stand on the edge, hearts pounding, waiting for the next wave to crash upon us, threatening to sweep us away into the night. The air hung heavy, thick with dread and the sharp tang of iron. I remember the moment when the first stone flew through the air, a dark missile that shattered the fragile silence, spiraling toward the walls of Lilybaeum. It struck with a bone-rattling thud, reverberating through the hearts of men and women who stood frozen, some clasping their weapons, others their loved ones. Fear, palpable and electric, surged through us, curling like smoke around our limbs. We were not simply defenders, we were desperate souls, clinging to life as the world outside our battered walls bore down upon us. I remember the feel of the stone, the way it stirred the dust and blood beneath my feet, mingling the present with memories of laughter and warmth, now ghosts haunting this wretched battlefield. My brother, Marcus, stood beside me, a flicker of determination in his eyes, though I could see the doubt creeping in, gnawing at him like a ravenous wolf. He clutched his sword tightly, knuckles white, his breath coming in short bursts, each exhale a prayer and a curse. "We can hold them," he said, voice shaking. "We have to." But I saw it then, the quiver behind his resolve, the way his gaze darted to the horizon as if seeking an escape. I turned my gaze to the sea beyond our fortress, the waves crashing like war drums against the rocks, urging me to remember better days, days when life was not measured in days without death, but in simple joys, the taste of ripe figs, the laughter of children echoing in the warm sun. But here, the sun was an indifferent witness to our suffering, a cruel glare illuminating the shadows of our fears. It felt as if the cosmos had aligned against us, the stars themselves whispering tales of doom. In the midst of the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Marcia, our fearless leader, a woman forged of iron and fire. Her hair, a wild halo of gold, whipped around her face as she barked orders, eyes fierce and unwavering. I admired her. She was everything I wished to be: courageous, resolute, unyielding. And yet, I saw the flicker of anguish in her fierce eyes. Each battle cry she let loose was shadowed by the fear of loss, the ever-present spectre of death. The weight of command bore down on her, and I wondered, did she ever dream of a life unchained from this? Did she too long for the warmth of the sun on her skin without the taste of ash and blood? "Shields," she yelled. "Brace yourselves!" And the clang of metal on metal filled the air, a symphony of our desperation. The enemy was upon us, their war cries like the howling of 1,000 lost souls, each one piercing through the veil of night that was once our sanctuary. I remember the faces of my comrades, each one a canvas of fear and hope painted in stark relief. There was Lucius, trembling yet resolute, eyes wide as he clutched his spear like a lifeline. He had a laugh that could brighten a room, yet now it was swallowed by the cacophony of battle. I wanted to tell him he'd be okay, that we all would. But fear clamped down on my throat like a vice, and silence reigned between us, a shared understanding of our mortality. Then came the rush, shouting, the clash of weapons, the sickle-sweet scent of blood mingling with the salt of the sea. I found myself thrust into the fray, my heart pounding against my ribs, each beat a reminder that I was alive, that I had something, someone, to fight for. I swung my sword, the blade singing through the air, the weight of it a comforting presence amidst the chaos. But in the heat of battle, time twisted, a cruel trickster. It stretched and contracted, moments slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. I remember the thud of a body falling beside me, the gurgling gasp of a once vibrant man, his life extinguished in an instant. My stomach churned, the weight of grief crashing over me like the tide. Every death felt personal, every life lost was a piece of my own soul cleaved away, leaving a ragged void that echoed with unanswered questions. "Stay together!" Marcia shouted again, her voice rising like a phoenix amidst the storm. But I could see the cracks forming in her armor, the fatigue pooling beneath her eyes, a silent admission of the toll this had taken. It was a battle for survival, yes, but it was also a battle against despair. And I feared the day would come when despair would win. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a shroud of darkness enveloped us. Distant screams echoed on the wind, each one a reminder of our mortality. I found myself searching for Marcus amidst the swirling chaos, my heart a caged bird, flapping widely in the confines of my chest. Where was he? Had he fallen? 1,000 questions ricocheted in my mind, each one heavier, more suffocating than the last. And then, in that moment of stark, gut-wrenching clarity, I saw him. He was cornered, fighting for breath against two enemies, their faces obscured by the deepening shadows, a macabre dance of life and death unfolding before me. I felt the world slow, my mind screamed for me to move, but my body felt rooted, as if the very ground conspired to keep me from reaching him. "Marcus!" I cried, a sound torn from my throat, raw and primal. The word hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. And as our eyes met, I saw it, the flicker of hope, the determination to survive, and the understanding that we were tethered to one another by a bond stronger than fear. But then, as if time had finally resolved to march on, everything erupted. The clash of swords sang a brutal song, the air filled with echoes of struggle and the moans of the dying. I rushed forward, heart hammering, the world around me dissolving into a blur of chaos, the faces of our foes transforming into mere shadows. I could feel the agony thrumming in the air, a palpable, electric force that urged me onward, but also rooted me in place, whispering of inevitability. The sky darkened, the stars indifferent witnesses to our plight, as I charged into the fray, the ground trembling beneath my feet. In that moment, amidst the din of battle and the cries of my comrades, I realized that this was not just about holding the walls of Lilybaeum, it was about holding on to life itself, about the fragility of existence in the face of relentless despair. It was a battle for every heartbeat that echoed in the dark, a fight that would stretch beyond the borders of life and death, binding us together in a tapestry woven with threads of fear, love, and an unyielding desire to survive. And as the tide of battle surged around us, I knew it was only the beginning, a grotesque dance with fate that would lead us further into the abyss of uncertainty, into the very heart of what it meant to be alive, to be human in a world where the line between life and death was as thin as a whisper. The silence is deafening, a heavy blanket of dread stretching across the battlefield, smothering every heartbeat. Dust dances in the air, caught in the swathes of the fading sun, and it feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting. I stand there, pulse racing, my sword gripped tightly in clammy hands. The sky bleeds red, and the horizon shudders with the weight of what is about to unfold. In the distance, I can hear the rumble of hooves, the growl of warriors long driven mad by the scent of blood and the promise of conquest. I remember the look in Marcus's eyes just before we crossed the river, a flicker of fear masked by bravado. He was like a son to me, brimming with the naive hope of youth, yet burdened by the knowledge of what lay ahead. The stories of Hannibal's ferocity wrapped around us like a noose. "We're invincible, right?" he said, a grin cracking through his grime. But I saw the truth swirling beneath his bravado, like a shadow ready to swallow him whole. I wish I could give him my strength, but all I have left is this sinking feeling, this gnawing dread. Then there is Lucius, older, a veteran of too many fights, his shoulders stoop beneath the weight of memories he cannot escape. He carries the ghosts of fallen comrades in his weary eyes, and every step he takes sends ripples of sorrow through the air. I think of the times we shared raucous laughter over stale bread and cheap wine, how he'd tell tales of his youth, always ending with, "and then they cut off his head." His laughter had once been contagious, but now it's brittle, a thin veneer covering deep scars. I steal glances at him as the air thickens with tension. The words he once spat with mirth now seem to haunt him, each syllable a reminder of lives lost, dreams shattered. The sun drops, bleeding into the horizon, and suddenly, the shadows grow long and sharp. Rumors swirl like the wind, hints of betrayal, whispers of dissent. The Carthaginians are cunning. They know our weaknesses. Are we merely pawns in a game that stretches beyond the horizon? I can feel it in my bones, a gnawing uncertainty that claws at my very soul. If Hannibal's forces strike tonight, will we hold? Will Marcus live to see another dawn, or will Lucius succumb to the nightmare that devours him? Clocks tick in my mind, each second marked by the pounding of my heart, each minute a reminder of our mortality. Tension curls like smoke around us, palpable and intoxicating. The flames of our campfires flicker, casting eerie shadows that dance like specters on the ground, a macabre reminder of death lurking just beyond the flickering light. Laughter is a distant memory, now it has been replaced by hushed prayers and furtive glances. An owl hoots, its cry chilling, slicing the night air like a knife. It feels like a warning, a prophecy of doom that echoes in my ears. I remember the stories they told us as children of the fates that awaited those who dared to defy the gods, how they watched from Olympus, smirking at our folly. Did they peer down on us now? Did they chuckle at our arrogance as we prepared to face Hannibal, the demon of the Alps? I close my eyes, and in that moment, I wish I could escape to the simplicity of my boyhood days, when the wind whispered sweet nothings instead of the cries of impending doom. Then, the moment shatters, the thunder of hooves approaches, a storm of chaos bearing down upon us. The ground shakes, rattling our resolve as we ready ourselves for the onslaught. Every man's breath is a prayer, a flickering hope that we might survive this inferno. Marcus grips my arm, his knuckles white, eyes wide as saucers. "We can't lose." "We can't," he screams, and I can see it, the fire igniting within him, a flame that flickers but does not die. But what is hope when faced with the merciless tide of war? I want to shout words of encouragement, to instill courage in him, but my voice is a whisper against the cacophony that surrounds us. I watch as Lucius stands taller, drawing on some deep well of strength. Let them come, he bellows, and in that moment, he transforms into the very warrior we need. He becomes a bastion, a shield against despair. We fight for each other. For our brothers, our fathers. We will not falter. And there it is, the raw, electrifying power of camaraderie. The night is thick with fear, but Lucius shatters its hold with those words, igniting a spark in each of our hearts. I feel the surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, a wild, desperate hope rising like the tide as the enemy approaches. The first clash of metal resounds, a harsh symphony that echoes across the battlefield. The air thickens with the stench of sweat and fear mingling with the metallic tang of blood. I lunge forward, the chaos swirling around me, and in that moment, I remember every lesson I learned, every loss I endured. I am not alone, we are not alone. In the chaos, I see the glint of Marcus's sword as he charges into battle, unyielding. I hear Lucius's roar, a battle cry that sends shivers down my spine, awakening the warrior within me. The fear that once gripped my heart is replaced by a fierce determination, a primal instinct to protect and survive. But the darkness looms still, an ever-present spectre, and as I swing my sword, I cannot help but wonder, when this night becomes a memory, what will we have left? Time whispers its cruel mockery, a reminder that life is fleeting, and death is relentless. I fight, not just for survival but for the fleeting moments of joy that shimmer like stars in this endless void. And as the clash of arms surrounds me, I realize that hope is a precious, fragile thing, and in the heart of chaos, it burns the brightest. Yet, as the tides of battle surge and retreat, I sense something more, an ominous shadow that lingers just beyond the fringes of our fierce fight. The world shifts, the game is afoot, and the stakes are rising higher. Hannibal's gamble is only beginning. The sun hung low, a smouldering ember engulfed in a haze of dust and sweat. The air, thick with the scent of fear and desperation, was a heavy cloak draped over us. I stood there, feet rooted to the parched earth, my heart pounding like a war drum, each thud echoing the collective dread that surrounded me. The sound of boots, a relentless march, rattled my bones, an inescapable reminder that we were not just wandering, we were marching to Rome, chasing a ghost of hope amidst the chaos of our lives. I remember the faces. Oh, those faces, etched in the creases of despair, a ragged assembly of souls bound together by a singular dream that felt almost laughable. There was Marco, his brow furrowed, eyes haunted by the weight of his choices. A once idealistic poet, now a soldier of circumstance, he clung to the remnants of his abandoned verses, the words slipping through his fingers like sand. Each line he once wrote, a siren song of love and revolution, now a distant echo, drowned out by the clash of steel and the cries of the desperate. Beside him, Ilara, fierce and unyielding, her spirit a raging inferno against the encroaching darkness. Her laughter once danced like sunlight through autumn leaves, but now it was a brittle shell, cracking under the pressure of the world's cruelty. She wore her grief like armor, each loss a scar that stitched her heart into an unrecognizable shape. I could see it in her eyes, a flicker of defiance battling the despair. "We will not break," she whispered, yet the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The road was a living thing, writhing beneath our feet, a treacherous serpent coiling tighter around our dreams. Every step forward felt like a step into oblivion. The soldiers, once our protectors, now moved through us like ghosts, their faces masked with indifference, a wall between us and any semblance of safety. I remember a soldier's sneer, words spat like venom, "You think you deserve Rome." It cut deeper than a blade, a bitter reminder that our dreams were but whispers against the roar of reality. We pressed on, the shadows of our past trailing us like phantoms. I could almost hear them, the echoes of laughter from taverns gone stale, the warmth of a lover's embrace now turned to frost. Memories clung to us, wisps of smoke that twisted and turned, forever out of reach. Time is a thief, I thought, and I felt it stealing pieces of us, leaving only hollow shells. The horizon stretched endlessly, a stark reminder that hope can be as cruel as it is kind. The nights were the worst. Darkness draped over us like a shroud, and the stars became our only witnesses. I remember Ilara's voice, a melody threaded with anxiety, "What if we never reach it?" Her words hung heavy in the air, a question that gnawed at my soul. How many more nights would we lie under this oppressive sky, counting the stars that felt as unreachable as our dreams? In those moments, the silence was deafening, a cacophony of unspoken fears. A storm broke one fateful night, the heavens unleashing a torrent that felt like the world's lament. Raindrops lashed at our skin, cold and biting, transforming the earth into a mire. We huddled together, our bodies pressed tight, sharing warmth like a fragile secret. Marco, his voice barely rising above the din, recited the fragments of his poetry, words that danced like fireflies, illuminating the darkness. "We shall rise," he proclaimed, a desperate hope woven into each syllable. But the rain fell harder, drowning his words, washing away our dreams into the muddy torrent. I could see the despair creeping into Marco's eyes, the flicker of his spirit dimming. Fear gripped my chest like a vice. What if the poet was lost forever in the depths of this storm? I ached to reach out, to pull him back from the edge, but the world had a way of swallowing whole those who dared to dream. The next morning, the sun emerged reluctantly, casting a pale light over the wreckage of our spirits. We trudged on, the weight of our failures dragging us down. As we approached a crumbling village, the ghosts of lost futures lingered in the air, their whispers mingling with the wind. I could sense a shift in Marco. He had become a shell of the man he once was, the flicker of rebellion snuffed out. Ilara, ever fierce, refused to let despair claim us entirely. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice steady, yet trembling under the weight of uncertainty. "We will not allow them to take our dreams." But deep down, I could see the cracks forming in her resolve. Like a fragile glass ornament, she was beautiful and delicate, threatening to shatter under the weight of our trials. Each day blurred into the next, a relentless march toward an uncertain fate. I remember the moments that felt like eternity, the laughter of children that echoed through the ruins, the way the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of sorrow and hope. With each passing day, I felt the pull of Rome, a city that promised so much yet felt like a mirage, just out of reach. As we drew closer, the weight of our journey settled heavily on our shoulders. The streets of Rome loomed ahead, tantalizingly close, yet shrouded in shadows. The promise of a new beginning felt simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. I could sense the tension between us, a storm brewing within our hearts. We were no longer just a band of dreamers, we were soldiers of hope, each of us bearing the scars of our own battles. In that moment, I realized, this was not merely a march to a city, it was a pilgrimage through the very essence of our souls, a baptism in the fires of our fears and hopes. We were marching to Rome, yes, but we were also marching toward the inevitable confrontation with our pasts, our failures. And in that uncertainty lay the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence, beautiful, grotesque, and utterly human. And as we took those final steps into the city, the air crackled with an electric tension, a promise of confrontation that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I could feel it, the heartbeat of Rome, thrumming in sync with my own. The trials were far from over, they were just beginning. The sun hung low, a fiery or bleeding crimson into the horizon. In its wake, shadows crept like whispers across the battlefield of Cannae, where earth and sky conspired to bear witness to the encroaching storm. The air crackled with tension, thickening like the breath of a predator poised to strike. Soldiers trembled, their hearts pounding like war drums, echoing the relentless rhythm of fate. I remember the scent of sweat mingling with the metallic tang of fear, a fear that twisted in my gut like a coiling snake. I stood alongside Gaius, a man carved from the very stones of Rome, his jaw clenched tight enough to shatter bone. His eyes, fierce and unyielding, darted over the ranks of our army, searching for courage in tired faces. He was a man of conviction, but today his resolve faltered like a flame flickering in the wind. "We are the might of Rome," he murmured under his breath, though I could hear the doubt woven into his words. "We must not falter." Then there was Lucius, my childhood friend, a gentle soul trapped in a world of iron and blood. His hands, once tender as a lover's touch, were now stained with the soot of battle. I remember the way he looked at me, eyes wide with unspoken terror. "What if we lose?" he asked, his voice barely more than a breath, a fragile thread pulling taut. "What if we are nothing more than ghosts on this battlefield?" The question hung heavy in the air, a spectre that taunted us, reminding us that courage often danced perilously close to despair. The ground beneath us trembled with the march of soldiers, a throbbing pulse that seemed to sync with the very beat of our hearts. It was impossible to ignore the vastness of the impending clash. The Carthaginian army, led by the indomitable Hannibal, loomed like an ominous tide, ready to engulf us. I could see their banners rippling like the wings of dark birds sweeping down from the sky, heralding our potential doom. "Stay close," I whispered to Lucius, gripping his shoulder, a gesture that felt both reassuring and inadequate. We moved through the throngs of men, their faces masks of anxiety and determination, each man a thread in the fabric of our fate. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that intertwined like the destinies of those who stood ready to fight and those who would not see the dawn. As the two armies clashed, the cacophony erupted, a brutal symphony of steel and screams that echoed through the valleys. I could feel the ground shake with each charge, the very earth alive, writhing under the weight of despair and valor. I fought with every ounce of strength, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, blurring the line between man and machine. Each swing of my sword was an act of defiance against the darkness closing in. But in the heart of chaos, there was Gaius, fighting valiantly. His battle cry cut through the din like a beacon, a desperate call to arms that ignited the hearts of our men. But his strength came at a cost. I watched as he parried a blow aimed at his side, his expression ferocious, yet I saw the cracks. The sweat mingled with blood, and for a moment, I glimpsed the vulnerability beneath the armor, the man behind the legend. His sacrifices weighed heavily on my own conscience. "Do not become a martyr," I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. "We fight together." Yet, in the chaos, Lucius fell. A single moment, an arrow flew like a whisper through the air, finding its mark in his chest. Time slowed, stretching into eternity as I watched him stagger, confusion painting his features. I remember screaming, the sound piercing the cacophony, a primal howl that rose from the depths of my soul. "No." It was a word that shattered the air. It was the last gasp of hope, the final flicker of light in an encroaching darkness. I rushed to him, the thrumming of battle fading into a distant roar as I sank to my knees beside him. My hands cradled his head, warm blood seeping through my fingers, a cruel reminder of mortality. "Lucius, stay with me," I pleaded, my voice breaking, raw and ragged. He blinked slowly, his gaze slipping into the void, and in that moment, I felt the weight of our dreams crumbling. "I remember the sun," he whispered, a soft smile ghosting across his lips, even as the life ebbed from his body. "I remember laughter." And just like that, he was gone, a flicker extinguished, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of ashes in my mouth. The world around me faded, and I was adrift in a sea of chaos, each wave crashing harder than the last. I was no longer just fighting for Rome, I was fighting for the memory of my friend, for the laughter we had shared, for dreams that now flickered like dying stars. And then, I saw Gaius again, battling against the tide, his former silhouette against the dying light. He was a warrior, yes, but he too was a man, flawed, imperfect, haunted. With every blow he struck, I sensed the burden of his sacrifices clawing at him. I could see it in the way he fought, not just for victory, but to honor the fallen. The tide shifted, the Carthaginian forces closing in, and with it, the realization that we were all shadows dancing on the brink of oblivion. And yet, as despair threatened to swallow us whole, I felt something stir within me, a flicker of defiance, a surge of rebellion against fate. We were more than soldiers, we were brothers bound by the blood of sacrifice and the weight of loss. And even in the darkest hour, when hope felt like a distant memory, I knew we would fight, together. The battle raged on, our spirits intertwined, a tempest of courage and despair, each heartbeat a reminder of why we stood on this haunted ground. The ghosts of those we loved lingered in the whispers of the wind, urging us forward into the abyss, into the very heart of the storm. And as we clashed with our enemies, we became more than warriors, we became legends, etched into the very fabric of time. In the face of darkness, we would rise. The echoes of distant gunfire curled through the air like the haunting wail of a siren, wrapping around Private Alex Novak like a shroud. His heart raced, each thump pounding in rhythm with the chaos outside, a relentless metronome marking time in this hellish symphony. The world blurred, fear, adrenaline, the metallic taste of blood, everything became a throbbing, vivid pulse that reminded him he was alive. For now. Stay low, stay quiet, he hissed, his words barely a whisper, as if the very act of speaking could awaken the ghosts hiding in the shadows. Beside him, Sergeant Maya Patel remained stoic, her dark eye scanning the dilapidated infrastructure of what used to be a bustling marketplace. Now it was a graveyard of memories, bricks and debris littering the ground like the remnants of a past life. The scent of charred earth filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of gun oil on their hands, their uniforms stained with the remnants of conflict. I remember when this place was alive, Maya murmured, a distant look in her eyes. Children laughed here. Vendors shouted their wares. Now, just silence. She clenched her jaw, the vulnerability she showed contrasting sharply with her usual fierce demeanor. In the silence, her pain was palpable, a dark tide rising within her. They were both haunted by memories. For Alex, it was the echo of his mother's laughter, the warmth of home. For Maya, it was the vibrant colors of her childhood, now muted by the gray of war. Each memory was a weapon, sharp and unyielding, cutting deeper with every moment they spent in enemy territory. Focus, Alex snapped, pulling Maya back from the brink of nostalgia. We need to get to the extraction point. He couldn't afford to lose her, she was his anchor in a world that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him, heavier than the rifle slung across his back. Maya nodded, shaking off the past like water from a duck's back, but the shadows lingered, whispering secrets of despair. They crawled along the ground, hearts pounding loud enough to drown out the faint sounds of the city stirred with the chaos of conflict. Every rustle of leaves, every distant shout felt like a countdown, a reminder that they were intruders in someone else's life, in someone else's story. And then it came. A thunderous explosion shattered the night, sending a shockwave through the air, rattling their bones, and the ground quaked beneath them. Alex and Maya were thrown back, the world around them erupting in chaos as debris rained down like a merciless storm. I can't, Maya gasped, struggling to push herself up, terror rippling through her voice. Get up. We have to move. Alex shouted, panic sharpening his edges, cutting through the fog of shock that clouded their minds. In that moment, all the training, all the drills, all the preparation melted away, leaving only the raw, primal instinct to survive. They stumbled into the shadows of a crumbling building, gasping for breath, the air thick with dust and the bitter residue of fear. Alex could feel the weight of their mortality in every breath, a reminder of the thin line they walked between life and death. Why are we here? Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Why are we fighting? I don't know, he admitted, feeling the weight of uncertainty wash over him. But we have to keep going. For them. For us. The truth was a jagged edge in his throat. They fought for a cause they didn't fully understand, a purpose obscured by the fog of war. Night bled into day, but time lost its meaning in the desolation. Shadows stretched and twisted, their forms shifting like the ghosts of those who once walked these streets, memories of lives lived before the chaos. Each flash of gunfire illuminated their faces, fear, determination, and a vulnerability that bared their souls in the face of unspeakable horror. Maya clenched her fists, anger flaring like a dragon's breath. We're not just soldiers. We're people too. We have dreams, we have lives back home. Her voice cracked, the emotion spilling over like a tide threatening to drown them both. Why does it feel like we're just cogs in a machine? Because we are, Alex replied, the truth settling heavy on his chest. But we can still make a difference. We can still fight for something better. They moved forward, driven by a shared desperation, shadows trailing them like specters. In the stillness, the whispers of the past faded, replaced by the roar of the present. Every footstep felt like a countdown, a reminder that life was fragile, and they were mere threads in a tapestry of chaos, hanging by a fragile weave. On 3, Alex breathed, his eyes narrowing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. 1, 2, and then they burst into the open, a storm of movement and noise, a ballet of survival. Gunshots rang out, sharp and precise, crackling through the air like thunder. Each bullet was a prayer for survival, a desperate hope. In that instant, time shattered, a million moments colliding into one. The world felt both vast and claustrophobic, a swirling vortex of chaos, dreams, and primal instincts. I remember when I thought bravery was about never feeling fear, Alex shouted, adrenaline fueling his words. But it's about pushing through it. It's about living when all you want to do is hide. Maya's eyes shone with fierce determination as she charged forward, each step fueled by the ghosts of their pasts, the laughter and the dreams now intertwined with the urgency of the moment. And in the heart of enemy territory, where shadows danced and the echoes of the past haunted their every step, they fought, not just for survival, but for the flickering hope of a tomorrow where laughter would fill the air once more, and the ghosts of their memories would finally rest. This was war, a terrifying and beautiful struggle against the darkness, where life and death intertwined in a relentless embrace. But the fight was far from over, it was just beginning, a spiral that would pull them deeper into the heart of chaos. The air hangs thick with uncertainty, a silence that rumbles in one's chest like a distant storm. I can still hear the echoes of hurried footsteps, the frantic whispers darting through the shadows of the dim, flickering kitchen. They slice into the heavy atmosphere, pulling me back to that moment when I stood at the window, fingers pressed against the cold glass, watching the world outside unravel. It was a time of war, the clattering of steel and the cries of the lost seeped into our bones, making us tremble like leaves in an autumn gale. I remember the night Clara came home, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes a wild mix of fear and defiance. She stumbled through the door, breathless, as if she were a ghost escaping some unspeakable horror, and in that instant, I felt the shudder of 1,000 unsaid words. "They're calling for more men," she gasped, her voice wavering like the last light of day. "The men are leaving, and I was already shaking my head, the knot in my stomach tightening. I had seen too many souls swallowed by the battlefield, and the thought of losing another man, another brother, another father, was unbearable. "Not Simon," I whispered, my heart clawing inside my chest. But Clara held my gaze, fierce and unyielding. "He'll go. They all will." Her words were edged with steel, but something flickered in her eyes, an unyielding love, mingled with the fear of despair. "We can't let fear bind us. We must stand tall, or all will be lost." And then there was Paul, my husband, who sat at the kitchen table, head bowed, hands trembling around the wooden frame. He was a good man, his heart as vast as the ocean, but in that moment, he was a ship lost at sea, battered by the relentless waves of war. "I can't," he muttered, voice low, almost a prayer. "They need me here." I wanted to scream, to shake sense into him, but terror gripped my throat. I knew, beneath the surface, he longed to fight, to reclaim his place in a world crashing down around us. I remember the night when the clock ticked louder than ever, its hands shaking as if grasping at the remnants of a life we once knew. Clara, darting around, filling the empty spaces with laughter, trying to paint the dim air with colors we had lost. "Just one more day," she said, spinning a tale of hope. "You'll see, the war will end. And we'll be together again, stronger than ever." Each word was a thread, woven into the tapestry of our lives, stitching holes that threatened to tear us apart. But then came the shadows, creeping closer each day, the whispers growing darker. I could feel the weight of their gaze on us as if the very walls of our home were filled with the specters of the fallen. I watched Clara as she transformed, her laughter now a fragile thing, a glass bauble at risk of shattering. The girl who once ran barefoot through the fields now darted between chores, her spirit caught in the grip of imminent loss. She would help the mothers with their children, offering solace, but her own heart was a battlefield, torn between duty and fear. Paul's face, once a canvas of dreams, was now painted in lines of worry. "I'll make it through," he told me one night, though I sensed the lie in his voice. The light flickering from the candle, shadows danced across his face, twisting his features into something unrecognizable. I wanted to reach out, to pull him back from the brink of despair, but the words faltered on my lips, strangled by the weight of reality. "Promises," I said, almost too softly. "We make promises to each other, don't we?" "Yes," he whispered, the word a fragile thing, hanging in the air. "But the world is shifting. Everything is changing." But still, we clung to those promises, each heartbeat echoing in the silence that engulfed us. I remember the chill in the air when the letter arrived, so stark against the warmth of our home. It was paper, etched with the ink of fate, and when Paul held it, his hands trembled as if it were a live wire. Clara and I stood frozen, fear pooling in the pit of our stomachs as he read the words that would change everything. The draft. He was to enlist. I watched as rage and fear twisted inside me, a tempest of emotions threatening to spill forth. "You can't go," I pleaded, voice breaking, each syllable a desperate plea. But Paul's eyes were stone, hardening against the tide of my tears. Clara moved closer, resting a hand on my shoulder, both of us pulled into the vortex of his decision. "I must," he said, a man torn between duty and love, his voice steady yet raw, like the edges of a broken glass. "They need me." And I felt as though the ground had given way beneath my feet. I wanted to scream against the injustice of it all, to shake him until reason returned to his eyes. But the walls of our home closed in, a reminder of the life we built, now teetering on the brink of collapse. I remember the last night before he left. I sat with Clara, the two of us wrapped in blankets, tears streaming down our faces as the weight of the world pressed down on us. "What if he doesn't come back?" she whispered, the sound barely escaping her lips. "Then we'll carry his memory," I replied, though the words felt like ashes in my mouth. I wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but deep down, I knew the truth. We were standing at the edge of an abyss, teetering perilously close to an uncertain fate. Outside, the stars twinkled, indifferent to our plight. Time moved onward, relentless and unyielding, spinning us into a future where fear and love intertwined like vines, choking the very essence of what we once were. The shadows of war loomed, and all we had were memories, promises whispered beneath the weight of darkness. "Stay with me," I begged the night, the fragile thread of hope stretching as thin as the dawn breaking on the horizon. And in that moment, I knew we were not alone. The spirits of all the women, all the families caught in the storm of conflict, surrounded us, each heartbeat a reminder of love's unbreakable bond, even in the face of despair. As the dawn broke, the world remained a battlefield, but in our hearts, the flame of resilience flickered, a testament to the strength that held us together. The ground trembles beneath my feet, a low rumble that sends a shiver up my spine. I stand at the crest of a hill, a lonely warrior swallowed by the chaos below. The battlefield is a twisted tableau of mud, blood, and desperation, the air heavy with the acrid scent of smoke and fear. In the distance, I glimpse them, massive shadows moving with a terrifying grace, their presence a living omen. Elephants. Ancient giants, armored in cloth and steel, trumpeting a sound that reverberates through my very bones. They are not merely beasts of burden, they are harbingers of destruction, and their eyes hold the weight of 1,000 battles. I remember the first time I laid eyes on Marduk, a colossal bull with skin like cracked earth, his tusks sharp as the blades in our hands. I had laughed then, believing I could tame him with kindness, but now I realize the absurdity of it. Marduk was not a friend, he was a force of nature. His breath is hot, a tide of fury that washes over me as I stand beside him, my heart racing in sync with the pounding of his great chest. "This isn't a game," I whisper to him, my voice a fragile thread, barely heard above the clamor of war. Beside me, Asha trembles, her fingers grazing Marduk's flank, her eyes wide with a mixture of dread and awe. The daughter of my commander, she has a spirit forged in fire but a heart still tender. "Will he listen to us?" she asks, her voice quaking, each word a fragile bird fluttering against the storm. I want to say yes, to fill her with hope, but the truth is a cold shadow lurking in my throat. Marduk's will is as unpredictable as the winds, and as war rages, my bond with him grows tenuous, fraying at the edges. The drums of war beat heavy in the distance, a rhythmic pulse that quickens my blood. I can almost taste the fear on the wind, a bitter tang that clings to the back of my throat. We turn our eyes towards the enemy, a dark sea of men, weapons glinting like stars in the sickly light. I remember my brother, Kieran, who fell beneath the weight of a spear just days before. I can still hear him laughing, the sound like music, now drowned in the symphony of chaos. I push the memory away, but it creeps back, relentless. "Focus," I remind myself, but the word feels hollow, lost in the cacophony. Marduk snorts, a plume of steam rising from his flared nostrils, and I feel a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. "We are not just soldiers," I say, my voice rising, clinging to the hope in my heart. We are a force. The words fall from my lips like stones, heavy with the weight of conviction. Asher nods, determination igniting a flicker of light in her eyes. This moment, this fleeting span of courage, fills me with a warmth that fights against the creeping dread. But then chaos erupts. The enemy charges, a wave of anger and desperation crashing against our lines. Marduk charges ahead, a thunderstorm made flesh, and I can feel the surge in my bones. Hold on! I shout, gripping the reins tight, feeling Asher's warmth beside me. Her fear seeps through the fabric of our shared struggle, but I can't let doubt win, I can't let her down. Elephants are not just beasts, they are a living embodiment of fury, strength, and fear. They trample forward, their massive feet pounding the earth like the heartbeat of the world. I hear the screams, the terrified cries of men as Marduk leads us into the fray. He is a whirlwind, his body a fortress as he swings his massive head, scattering the enemy like leaves caught in a storm. I feel alive, a strange elation dancing in my chest as death surrounds me. But it's fleeting, this high. In the thick of it, I lose sight of Asher. There's a moment, a heartbeat, where I feel her absence like a dagger twisting in my gut. I turn, scanning the chaos, and there she is, struggling to rein in a smaller elephant, a young one who thrashes against her grasp. Marduk! I shout, the name a lifeline, and he responds, a rumble of power beneath me as he veers toward her. The battle rages on, the air thick with the scent of iron and sweat, and I feel the ground shake, each thud a reminder of what we are up against and what we stand to lose. Asher's hands are blooded, and I see the panic in her eyes as she fights to control the young one. I leap from Marduk's side, feeling weightless for a moment, crashing into the madness. Asher! I scream, but the sound is swallowed by the roar of the fight. Time slows. I feel the air crackle around me, the tension thick as a storm cloud ready to burst. I reach her, wrapping my arms around the young elephant's neck and whispering sweet nothings I hope will calm the beast. You are strong. You are powerful. You are safe. I breathe it into existence, a fragile promise against the onslaught. But in that moment, the world shifts. A spear flies through the air, a dark streak of death, and I see it in slow motion, its trajectory aimed at Asher. Time stretches, and I think of Kieran, of all the lives that shattered like glass, and I am not ready to lose her. I push forward, my body colliding with hers, and we tumble, the ground rushing up to meet us. The spear misses, embedding itself in the earth like a twisted promise of what might have been. Stay with me. I gasp, heart pounding, the weight of what we do is heavier than steel. I see her face, fear and determination blending in a single moment, and I realize the battle isn't just for survival, it's for connection, for the fragile thread that keeps us tethered to hope. As the elephants advance, their bodies a wall of living strength, I know the fight is far from over. The specter of war looms, but we are not alone in this chaos. Together we stand, two flawed souls intertwined in battle, ready to face the darkness that threatens to consume us all. And in that moment, we become part of something greater, a testament to resilience, a dance of life and death that stretches beyond the horizon. The battle is ours to claim, and as Marduk trumpets a fierce call to arms, I know that I will stand my ground, no matter the cost. The night was thick with tension, a suffocating cloak that wrapped around the soldiers like a shroud. Shadows flickered, the dying embers of a once roaring fire casting ghostly shapes on the canvas of the tent. I could hear the low murmur of prayers whispered into the dark, a chorus of desperate voices calling out for salvation, for courage, for anything that could shield them from the horrors of war. I felt it all, the weight of their fear, their longing, the gnawing ache for something greater than themselves. God, if you're up there, I heard Thompson mutter, his voice cracking like dry twigs underfoot. The man was a tornado of emotions, a complicated mix of bravado and vulnerability. Each word hung heavy in the air, laden with the kind of raw desperation that only the edge of death can provoke. He clutched a worn-out cross against his chest, fingers trembling as if it were a lifeline, his last hope in a world gone mad. I remember the first time I saw him, a bright-eyed recruit with dreams painted in colors too vivid for the battlefield. I remember how his laughter danced on the air, unguarded and free. Now, the laughter was gone, replaced by the weight of silent prayers and unspoken fears. the cancerous grip of doubt gnawing at his resolve. "I'll make it through this," he had said back then, but now, crumpled in the darkness, I wondered if he still believed it. Beside him, Ramirez sat cross-legged, eyes closed, flitting between the tangible world and some deeper, hidden realm. I watched as he traced patterns in the dirt, his fingers forming invisible sigils, an act of ritual, a lifeline to the divine, to the ancestors whose shadows loomed large in our minds like phantoms. He had a calmness that felt almost otherworldly, a sense of purpose that grounded him as the chaos swirled around us. "It's the spirits," he would say when we dared to talk of fear and death. "They guide us. They protect us." But as I listened to Thompson's frantic prayers, I couldn't help but wonder, which spirits? Which gods? What if they were busy somewhere else, their attention drawn to more pressing matters? The cosmos felt vast and indifferent, a silent witness to our plight, and I was consumed by the question that gnawed at all of us: what divine force would send us into this madness, and why? I remember nights spent on watch, the churning thoughts refusing to let me sleep. Each tick of the clock echoed like the tolling of a bell, each sound a reminder of mortality. My own fears spiraled, feeding off Thompson's desperation and Ramirez's calm. A tempest of emotions whirled inside me, a cocktail of rage, sorrow, and hope, each sip stronger than the last. The moon hung low, a pale eye watching our every move, a reminder that we were nothing but specks of dust in a universe filled with chaos. The scent of burning sage filled the air, an aromatic shield that wove through my memories, remembrance ceremonies back home, incense wafting through quiet churches, the solemn faces of those whose faith anchored them. I felt it all, the pull of history, the rituals that had shaped us long before we took up arms. The words of the sacred texts, the chants, the rites, they had always been our guide, a compass in the dark. And yet, what could they offer now? As the wind howled outside, a low lament that mixed with our own fears, I felt the fragility of those rituals. "It's all noise," Thompson said once, scorn spilling from his lips. "They can't protect us. They're just words." But his words stung, like a lash across the face of faith. Those rituals held weight, didn't they? Even now, as the night thickened and the darkness seeped into our hearts, I clung to them. The symbols, the prayers, they became talismans, reminders that hope still flickered somewhere, even in the depths of despair. The tension mounted as the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows stretching hungrily, whispering ominous promises. We could feel the shift, a static crackle in the air, anticipation coiling tightly in our chests. Our final mission loomed ahead, a spectre cloaked in uncertainty. Each heartbeat echoed the drums of war, a sinister rhythm we could neither ignore nor escape. Ramirez's voice cut through the silence, soothing yet firm. "Tonight, we honor both the living and the dead," he murmured, a prayer spilling from his lips like a waterfall. He raised his hands, fingers spread wide, as if beckoning the very heavens to listen. The words flowed, weaving a tapestry of reverence, binding us together. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the tent, but he stayed, anchored against the tide of something larger than himself. And then, with a single, bold breath, I joined him. My voice trembled at first but grew, a song woven from the fabric of our fears, our hopes, and yes, our rage. We were soldiers, yes, but we were also human. The ritual bound us, wrapping around our souls like the arms of the divine, a reminder that we were more than mere instruments of war. Loud cracks echoed in the distance, the sound of artillery, the growl of machines hungry for blood. My heart raced as my mind spiraled in and out of clarity, visions of darkened streets, the ghosts of those who had come before us flickering in the periphery. I remembered the faces of friends lost, the dreams of futures that would never be fulfilled, and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. But in that moment, as we clung to our fragile faith, I felt a flicker of something, defiance, perhaps. In the silence that followed, I glanced at Thompson, his eyes aflame with need, and at Ramirez, his serenity fierce against the tide. We were united, a ragtag trio of frailty and strength, whispering our prayers into the void, and still, the night pressed on, relentless, inviting us deeper into its clutches. To the spirits, to our brothers, to hope, I found myself murmuring, every word a lifeline, every syllable a heartbeat. The shadows danced, and I knew that whatever awaited us outside those flimsy walls would not break us. Not tonight. The air was thick with something sacred, and in that moment, we were invincible, wrapped in our own fragile rituals, trembling yet bold, ready to face whatever came next. And as dawn approached, the horizon catching fire with the promise of a new day, the tension hung heavy, a tangible pulse that made the night feel eternal. I knew then that our story was not over, it was merely in the throes of transformation, an echo that would resonate long after the last prayer faded into the void. The air hung heavy, thick with the acrid stench of burnt earth and blood, swirling around like ghosts of the many who had just fallen. Silence loomed, oppressive and weighty, louder than any battle cry. I stood there, rooted to the ground as if the very soil was swallowing me whole. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the field of carnage, where the remnants of lives once vibrant lay scattered like discarded dreams. Hope had become a distant whisper, a flicker in the vast darkness. Myra knelt beside a body, a young man, no older than 20. Her hands trembled as they hovered above him, wishing to grant him life with a touch, the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips as she remembered him laughing just hours before. "Wake up, please," she whispered, a plea that clawed at her throat, raw and aching. "You promised we'd laugh again." The words fell like stones in the stillness, sinking under the weight of despair. A fierce wind howled, but it felt like the anguished cry of the universe, recognizing the loss. I could see the panic flicker in her eyes, a storm brewing just beneath the surface, but she swallowed it down. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that it was okay to feel the fear, to let it seep through the cracks of her resolve. But there was no time for comforting words, only the relentless beating of a heart that ached for the living and the dead alike. Cries of men echoed in the distance, mingling with the cries of the wounded, forming a dissonant symphony that played into the void. Caspar, always the bravest, though I'd say foolish, charged through the wreckage, his face smeared with dirt and blood, eyes wide, electric with determination. "We can't leave them," he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. "There are still people alive." Every syllable spat out like shrapnel, sharp and urgent, fueling a flicker of hope amidst the despair. But I knew better, hope was a dangerous thing on a battlefield. I felt the weight of memories tugging at me, uninvited and chaotic. I remembered the warmth of laughter, the bright sunlight filtering through the trees back home, the scent of freshly baked bread filling the air. How could I reconcile those moments with the grotesque reality before me? The umbilical cord of nostalgia binding me to life before the chaos, where the only battles fought were over the best bread recipe or who would win the next village game. But here, amidst the twisted metal and shattered bones, reality was blunt and unforgiving. "We can't save them all," I murmured, but the words fell flat, suffocated by the weight of the world. Caspar shot me a glance, fierce and wild, as if daring me to suggest otherwise. "Every life counts," he growled, as if trying to shake the ghosts of doubt clinging to me. And maybe he was right, with each life lost, the world twisted a little more out of shape, an unraveling thread in the tapestry of existence. Myra looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her heart laid bare before us. "We'll carry them home," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "They deserve to be laid to rest with honor, not left like refuse. They were people." Her words hung in the air, a desperate plea wrapped in determination, as she wiped the dirt-streaked cheeks with the back of her hand, her resolve as fierce as the storm brewing in the sky above. And I stood there, a spectator, paralyzed by the weight of it all. Each breath I took was heavy, filled with sorrow and guilt that I couldn't be as brave, couldn't throw myself into the maelstrom like they could. But beneath that guilt lay something more primal, a flicker of fear that threatened to consume me. What if I became one of the fallen? What if I became a ghost, a memory in someone else's heart, forever tied to this battlefield? Night crept in, the shadows deepening, wrapping around us like a shroud. I could hear the distant howl of wolves, but it was not a comforting song, it was the harbinger of death and despair, prowling just beyond our feeble campfires. Caspar moved restlessly, his hands twitching as he surveyed the broken bodies, the sheer weight of loss pressing down on him. "Help me," he said suddenly, looking at me with an intensity that burned. "We will find them. We'll save everyone we can, even if it kills us." I could see the fire in his eyes, that unyielding spark of hope that clashed with the darkening sky. But what about those who had already been lost? It felt selfish to hope for more when so many had been ripped away from us, their stories unfinished. I could see the light fading in Casper's eyes as he grasped the reality of our situation. Time was slipping through our fingers like grains of sand. Myra stood up, dusting off her torn clothing, her expression fierce. "We will carry their memories with us," she said, her voice ringing clear in the thickening darkness. "We will honor them. They fought for something greater than themselves." Her words ignited a spark within us, igniting a fragile flame of determination. Yet, within that determination, I felt the shadows pressing in closer, the weight of the world growing heavier. I caught a glimpse of the moon, pale and cold, hanging like a ghost in the night sky, a silent witness to our small struggles and larger tragedies. For each victory we celebrated, the cosmos would claim its toll. As we began to gather the fallen, the night deepened around us, swallowing us in its embrace. I could feel every heartbeat, the rhythm of life pulsing against the stillness, a reminder that we were still here, still fighting. The echoes of our grief intertwined with our determination, creating a haunting melody that lingered in the air long after we had closed our eyes. And then, as the first light of dawn broke through the horizon, I realized that beneath the weight of despair, something beautiful was rising. We were still alive. We would carry the stories, the scars, the laughter, and the tears. We would become the ghosts that haunted the battlefield, a testament to those who had fought and fallen, forever entwined in the tapestry of life. And so, amidst the despair, the cycle continued, an unending dance of loss, memory, and the relentless pursuit of hope. A chilling silence enveloped the battlefield, a thick fog swirling through the remnants of the great Carthaginian army. Shadows stretched long and weary, clinging to the ground like desperate souls grasping for salvation. I remember the sharp tang of blood in the air, the metallic taste that clung to my tongue like a bitter reminder of mortality. A great leader stands amidst chaos, a titan among men, and yet in that moment, Hannibal Barca felt the weight of an eternity pressing upon his shoulders. He stood on the precipice of the battlefield, his gaze piercing through the haze, searching for something, anything, that could ignite a fire in the hearts of his warriors. But the echoes of despair rang louder than the cries of courage. This was not just a fight for territory, it was a battle for belief, for the heart of a people, and every heartbeat felt heavy with the anticipation of loss. To lead was to be burdened with fear, with hope, with an unrelenting sense of responsibility that gnawed at the soul. I remember the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the way it threatened to extinguish the flames of ambition he had stoked for so long. Across the field, General Scipio stood poised, an emblem of Roman resilience. Victory thrummed in his blood, a symphony of ambition that filled the air with a sense of destiny. He was a man forged in the fires of countless battles, but what haunted him most was not the enemy before him, but the specters of his past. Memories of lost comrades, their faces flickering like candlelight, whispered in his mind. Each one a ghost, reminding him of the fragility of life, of the thin line he walked between glory and ruin. I remember, he'd murmur to himself, the mantra a futile attempt to silence the phantoms that threatened to consume him. And then there was the third, Cynthia, a soldier whose spirit burned with a unique tenacity, striving against the expectations of her time. She fought not just for Carthage but for herself, for the right to wield a sword without fear of judgment. The battlefield was her sanctuary, her way to escape the confines of a world that sought to silence her. But the weight of leadership was a tempest that tore at her heart. "Why must we fight?" she had demanded once in the quiet of night, her voice a whisper that trembled with the weight of her own dreams. "Is this how we forge our legacy? Through blood and sorrow." In their respective corners, each general grappled with the specter of leadership. Hannibal, a master tactician, felt the pulse of his soldiers' fear, their doubts weaving through the ranks like a serpent ready to strike. His heart ached as he recalled the faces of men who had once believed in him, who had followed him across treacherous mountains and unyielding rivers, only to stand now on the brink of despair. "Lead us," they had shouted, but in that moment, he felt like a ghost himself, flickering on the edge of existence, torn between the hope of victory and the despair of inevitable loss. The thunder of hooves grew louder, the Roman cavalry a dark tide rushing to claim victory. Each beat echoed like the drum of fate, and Hannibal's heart raced in sync, a wild stallion caught in a storm. "We are not just soldiers," he whispered into the wind, as if he could convince the universe itself to hear him. "We are the very essence of courage." But courage, he realized, was a double-edged sword, capable of cutting deep in both triumph and tragedy. Cynthia looked at her comrades, their faces a mosaic of fear and determination, and in that fleeting moment, she understood the depth of sacrifice. She felt the stirrings of resolve within her, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of uncertainty. "We fight for more than just land, we fight for our existence," she shouted, her voice slicing through the fog, igniting a flicker of hope in the hearts of those around her. But the irony was not lost on her. What did it mean to fight for existence when existence itself felt so fragile? As the two armies surged towards one another, the world slowed, time stretching like a taut string ready to snap. The air was thick with tension, laden with the weight of unspoken fears and dreams. Faces transformed into masks of resolve, hearts pounding as if they could drown out the chaos. And yet, in the heart of the storm, Hannibal could feel the ground beneath him tremble, a reminder that all leadership is built on the shifting sands of uncertainty. Scipio's gaze locked onto Hannibal, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a recognition of the burden they both bore. In that moment, the battlefield became more than just a clash of swords, it was a crucible, a testament to the complexities of leadership. "You will not break me," Scipio thought, a fire igniting within his chest, but uncertainty clawed at him, a reminder that the fiercest battle lay not against the enemy but against his own doubts. And so, the clash commenced, a cacophony of chaos erupting as swords met shields with a sound that reverberated through the very fabric of existence. I remember the cries, anguished, desperate, the songs of men caught between dreams of glory and the cold embrace of death. In that maelstrom of emotion, every swing of a sword felt like a pulse, a heartbeat echoing the eternal struggle of humanity. Hannibal's heart raced as he fought, each encounter a visceral reminder of his humanity, the blood of his brothers staining the ground. In his mind, he could hear their cries, their names echoing through the chaos. Would he lead them to honor, or would he be the architect of their demise? "I remember," he murmured, the memories folding into the fabric of his being, an unending loop of hope and despair. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow across the battlefield, the fate of the world hung in the balance. Fear mingled with hope, each heartbeat a reminder that leadership was a double-edged sword, it demanded sacrifice, yet promised the glory of legacy. The battle raged on, a symphony of chaos and conflict, a testament to the indomitable human spirit caught in the throes of leadership. In that moment, there was no clear victor, only the relentless march of time, the ebb and flow of destiny intertwining the lives of Hannibal, Scipio, and Cynthia in an eternal dance of ambition, sacrifice, and the haunting echoes of choices made in the heart of conflict. The air was thick with the stench of burnt offerings, mingling with the acrid scent of sweat and fear. Bodies huddled in the shadows, their eyes darting, haunted by whispers of betrayal. What had once been a city of splendor teetered precariously on the brink of despair. I stood at the edge of the marketplace, where every corner echoed with the cries of merchants, but today, their voices were drowned out by a tension that gripped the heart of Carthage. The marketplace was a battleground, an arena of shifting loyalties, where promises fell apart like dried parchment. I saw her first. Dido, the queen whose name had once inspired songs of love and valor, now wore the mantle of anguish like a shroud. Her fingers trembled as she clutched a jagged piece of pottery, a symbol of the city's glory now lost to time. I remember her eyes, reflecting not just the flickering torchlight, but the shadows of her heart, so much weight in those depths. "Carthage will endure," she said, but her voice quaked like the city's foundation. And then there was Hannibal, a lion turned into a ghost. I remember the tales, how he crossed the Alps as if to conquer the heavens themselves, his brilliant mind a weapon sharper than any sword. But now, standing before his weary troops, the fire in his belly was dimmed. "We fight for our blood, our soil," he shouted, his voice cracking like thunder, but even he knew the truth, loyalty was as fragile as glass, and cracks had begun to spread. Betrayal curled like smoke around us, a phantom lurking just out of sight. I watched the soldiers, their faces lined with doubt. They were children, really, boys who had embraced the sword like a lover, but now they faltered, questioning if they should fight for a legacy that might shatter. I could see it in their faces, fear and longing twisted together like vines on a decaying wall. Dido, you must rally them. I wanted to shout, to shake her from her stupor. But how could she? For every cheer she summoned, there were whispers of discontent, like a shadow creeping closer. I remember how she looked at Hannibal, her heart freezing in her chest, knowing that his dreams were slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. Do you see them? She whispered, her voice a fragile thread. They do not believe. And he, with pain etched deep into his brow, replied, belief is a flickering flame. It can ignite a fire, or it can snuff a man's hope. The market fell silent, the weight of their words settling over us like a suffocating fog. I could hear the distant roar of the sea, a cruel reminder of nature's indifference. The waves crashed like a heartbeat, steady, relentless, mocking our faltering resolve. I remember that night, when shadows grew long and hunger gnawed at our bellies. The moon hung low in the sky, a pale witness to our suffering. The street lanterns flickered like dying stars. Each flicker was a heartbeat, a reminder that time was slipping away, that hope was a fragile thing. Dido stood at the edge of the cliff, her silhouette stark against the horizon, a queen on the brink of losing her kingdom. Carthage is more than stone and mortar, she said, her voice a soft, trembling sigh that seemed to echo in the stillness. It is the spirit of its people, of our dreams. But what if those dreams were built on the shifting sands of an uncertain future? What do you do when the very fabric of loyalty begins to fray? And then, out of the darkness, I saw a figure emerge, Mago, Hannibal's brother, known for his fierce loyalty but haunted by the spectre of doubt. He approached with hesitation, as if each step into the light could unravel him. Brother, he called, his voice a mere whisper carried by the wind. They say we are losing our grip. They say it is time to surrender. Hannibal's face hardened, but I could sense the tremor beneath his facade, a crack in the armor he wore like a second skin. Let them say what they will, he replied, but his words lacked the thunderous conviction of old. We will not cower like dogs. But I knew, in that moment, that he felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Each soldier was a ticking clock, their loyalty waning with every passing hour, their hearts heavy with the burden of survival. I remember the first time I saw a soldier break, the moment when a warrior, once brimming with courage, succumbed to despair. The shout of a dying man echoed through the night, a soul slipping through the fingers of fate. He had once fought for glory, for pride, but now he lay in a pool of his own blood, dreams extinguished. Is this our future? I whispered to the darkness, but the shadows offered no answers. They remained indifferent, simply watching as we spiraled further into chaos. As dawn broke, the sun cast a harsh light upon our reality. The city's pulse quickened, but hope felt distant, like a fading memory. Dido, with tears glistening in her eyes, stepped forward, her heart a fragile drumbeat. If we are to fall, let us fall together, she urged, but the very air seemed to shudder at her words. Through the shouts and whispers, I caught glimpses of their hearts, love tangled with fear, duty entwined with betrayal. They were not mere figures in a tale of war, they were flesh and blood, alive with dreams and heartbreak. Time slipped through our fingers, each moment a reminder of the inevitable. The sun hung low, a burning eye watching over the crumbling city, as the ghosts of our past danced in the shadows, waiting to claim what was left. And still, we stood on the precipice of choice. What would we become? Would we cling to the fraying threads of loyalty, or would we let them fall away, like autumn leaves swept up by a chilling wind? In that twilight, as the sun dipped low and shadows grew long, I felt a shiver run through the very marrow of my bones. I remember the sound of distant horns, a call to arms that rang out like thunder. Would it be one last stand, or the final lament of a city that once soared high? The weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders, and as I stood alongside Dido and Hannibal, I felt the gravity of their choices, the intensity of their struggles. Together, we were a tapestry of heartache, woven from the threads of hope and despair, each strand shimmering with the essence of a moment that could change everything. And as the sun set on Carthage, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, I knew that this was not just a city crumbling, but a heart breaking, a symphony of loss that would echo through time, forever haunting the dreams of those who dared to remember. The air is thick with the stench of iron and smoke, the distant echoes of clashing steel, a haunting chorus that wraps around me like a death shroud. I stand knee-deep in sodden earth, a battlefield transformed into a graveyard of promise and betrayal. I can still hear the cries of my brothers in arms, their voices rising and falling like the waves that once kissed the shores of our homeland. I remember the moment the enemy surged forward, silhouetted against the sun, their shadows long and predatory, a horde of rage and ambition. I swear I saw my friend, Hadrim, in that moment, his eyes wide with terror, the naivete youth clashing with the brutal reality of our fate. "Fight, Marcellus," he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the chaos, drowned beneath the clash of swords and the screams of the dying. "Fight," I repeated, but the word felt hollow, a leaf tossed in a storm. I could see it all, the glint of a spear, the raw desperation in Hadrim's face, how each heartbeat felt like a drum urging us forward into oblivion. Honor? Legacy? They felt like distant stars, unreachable, flickering in a vast, uncaring universe. Who was I, after all? Just a soldier stitched into the tapestry of war, one thread among many, frayed and fading. I remember the day I joined the ranks, driven by dreams of glory and tales told by flickering firelight. I wanted to carve my name into the stones of history, to be remembered, but here I am, muddied and broken, standing amidst the remnants of that dream. With every fallen comrade, I feel the weight of expectation, the burden of legacy pressing down like the heavy armor on my shoulders. Marcellus! It's Hadrim's voice again, pulling me from the depths of my thoughts. He's on the ground now, blood seeping through the cracks of his armor like ink blotting a page. I rush to him, my heart racing, pounding against my ribcage with the ferocity of a war drum. "Stay with me," I plead, the words escaping my lips like frantic prayers, yet deep down, I sense the futility. His breaths come shallow, each one a struggle, and I can see the light in his eyes dimming. "You're a hero, Hadrim. You will be remembered." But it sounds like a lie, the whisper of a ghost in a haunted house. "I don't want to be remembered," he gasps, a hint of a smile breaking through the pain. "I just want to go home." And there it is, the raw honesty, the aching truth. Home. It's not the stone walls or the banners flying high, it's the laughter of loved ones, the smell of warm bread, the taste of sweet pomegranate wine shared on a quiet evening. I don't want to speak the words that must come next. I'm terrified of them, like shadows lurking at the edge of the firelight. I want to promise him safety, to assure him that this war can be won, that our sacrifices matter. But as I look into his fading eyes, I know this isn't the end we wanted. The battlefield shifts around us, the screams of men rising and falling like a dreadful symphony. I can see faces, twisted in agony, their stories untold, their legacies untouched. Each one of us is a fragment of a dream gone wrong, shards of ambition glinting in the mud. There's Cale too, his laughter echoing in my mind, a memory of a time before blood and fire consumed our lives. He used to joke about how we'd be legends, how our tales would inspire the next generation. "They will write songs about us, brother," he'd say, the firelight dancing in his eyes. But who will sing our songs now? Will it be the bards? Or the ghosts who roam these fields, forever shackled to the memories of valor and loss? Will their voices mix with ours, creating a haunting melody, an elegy for the forgotten? I can't breathe, the weight of this moment crushing me. I press my hand against Hadrim's wound, feeling the warmth seep through my fingers. "You're a warrior," I whisper, knowing how inadequate it sounds, how the words are just a flimsy bandage for a gaping wound. "You are more than this fight." As the world around us blurs, the chaos, the clamor, the swirling dust, I'm paralyzed by the knowledge that honor doesn't come from the battlefield. It doesn't come from glory or recognition, it comes from the love we carry, the bonds we forge amid the ruins of war. Marcellus, Hadrim's voice is barely a whisper, and I feel the world tilt, the ground trembling beneath my feet. "Promise me." "I won't be forgotten." I nod, tears carving tracks through the grime on my face. "I promise," I breathe, but the promise tastes bitter, like ashes on my tongue. The clash of steel rings in my ears, a symphony of pain that won't cease, and I know this is just the beginning of a long, dark night. The echoes of battle are relentless, a reminder that honor is just a word, and legacy is built on the bones of the fallen. I look around at the faces, some familiar, some lost to the haze of war, and feel a surge of determination rise within me. I will tell their stories, keep their spirits alive in every heartbeat, every breath. I will carry their dreams into the dawn, a flickering flame in the encroaching darkness. Honor? It may not shield us from death, but it binds us to one another, to the essence of our humanity, our collective struggle. As I kneel beside Hadrim, cradling his head in my hands, I know this battle is far from over. The horizon darkens, and shadows stretch across the landscape. But somewhere deep inside, amid the chaos and despair, a spark ignites. I will not let this moment fade into oblivion. I won't let our sacrifices sink into the earth without echo. And so, I whisper into the wind, into the void that beckons us all, we will be remembered.